Hey friends, what up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Tesvav, Daf 15 of Masechta Rosh Hashanah. Friends, Daf 15 we continue talking about Esrogim and different parts of Esrog, how they apply to Shemitah and Meiser and all that kind of fun stuff. So whatever. Let's just jump in. Picking up where we left off yesterday. Of course, as I pointed out in the past, we always pick up where we left off yesterday. I'll go upon him. So, where are we? We're about 10 lines from the bottom of the page in Daf Yudalad Mabez. Here we go. Omer Rabba Bar Rafuna. Okay, you got it? About 10 lines from the bottom, second word on the line. Omer Rabba Bar Rafuna says, Rabba Bar Rafuna, who of course was the son of Rafuna. Hashad Omer Rabba Gamliel Esrig Achalikitaso Isuro Kiyerik. All right. Well, now that we've seen yesterday the opinion of Rabbi Gamliel, who says that when it comes to an esrig, in terms of meiser, so we determine the year, right? The year that it's going to be chayv meiser for, the nafkaminas for meiser sheni versus meiser ani, things like that. And also in terms of ma'asu min hachodesh al hachodesh, min yoshan al yoshan, etc. So the year that we determine, or the year that the esrog is considered, part of, is based on when you pick it. Oh my gosh, did that make any sense? I think the point came through though, which is that according to Rabbi Gamliel, when you pick the esrog, whatever year it is, that is the year that it counts as. So if it's currently the second year of the Shemitah cycle, so then it's going to be Meiser Sheni. If it's the third year of the Shemitah cycle, it'll be Meiser Ani, etc. Let's go weiter. Kiyerek, just like a vegetable. Vegetables are the same halacha, that when you pick it, that is the year for Meiser. Now, Rosh Hashanah Shelo Tishrei. Friends, you hear that? Says Rav Bar Rafuna that, Rabbi Gamliel says that the esrog is based on when you pick it. Well, if the esrog is based on when you pick it, that's essentially like a vegetable. Rabbi Gamliel, I think, even says it explicitly, right? He says an esrog is similar to a tree in three ways, and similar to a vegetable in one way, in that when you pick it, that's the year of Meiser that it counts for. So says Rabbi Bar Rafuna, if that's the case, that we treat an esrog like a vegetable regarding Meiser, well, just like vegetables, the Rosh Hashanah for their Meiser is Tishrei. So then the same thing applies to an esrog. That when it comes to esrog, Rosh Hashanah for Esrogim is Tishrei and not Tu B'Shvat. Interesting. All right. Meisvei. We have a kasha though. Reb Shimon ben Elazar says, Reb Shimon ben Elazar, liket esrog erev Tu B'Shvat. If a fellow chapsarain an esrog from a tree, so he picks it from the tree on the day before Tu B'Shvat, ad shelo tavo hashemesh, before sunset, v'chazav liket mishatavo hashemesh, then he chapsarain another esrog after Shkia on Erev Tu B'Shvat, so essentially now on Tu B'Shvat, in Tormin u'ma'asin mizelzeh, so you have to keep them separate. You basically picked this esrog in two separate years, and therefore, right, once before Tu B'Shvat began, once after Tu B'Shvat began, so you picked them essentially in two separate years, and therefore Trumas and Meisus you have to keep separate. And if it's the second year, let's go weiter. Because we don't take Trumas and Meisus from the new stuff on the old stuff, not from the old stuff and the new stuff. And therefore, if this was now the third year that was transitioning into the fourth year, so then Shlishis Meiser Rishon and Meiser Ani, so then the esrog that he picked before Shkia is going to be from the third year, and it's going to be shaykh to Meiser Ani, Revius Meiser Rishon, Umeiser Sheni. And the esrog that he picked after Shkia, i.e. on Tu B'Shvat, so it's already now going to be considered the fourth year, and therefore going to be chayv Meiser Rishon, as you're always chayv, but also Meiser Sheni for the fourth year, right? So the third year as Meiser Ani, the fourth year as Meiser Sheni. Now, now from the fact that we're talking about, the distinction between before Shkia and after Shkia, when he picks the esrog, So who's the man da'amar who says that meiser is determined based on when you pick it like a vegetable? Rabban Gamliel. So clearly, Reb Shimon ben Elazar, who's the author of this brisa, is holding like Rabban Gamliel, that when it comes to an esrig, its truma and meiser is dependent on when you pick it. V'katani shvat. And he's saying that the cutoff is Tu B'Shvat, right? He's saying that you pick it right before Shkia on Tu B'Shvat and right after Shkia on Tu B'Shvat. Kilu Erev Tu B'Shvat and after Shkia, fine. So what do we see? So we see that even though Rabbi Gamliel's opinion is that when it comes to an esrig, meiser is determined based on when you pick it, nonetheless, the Rosh Hashanah for it is Shvat and not Tishrei. Givaldig. So therefore, of course, it's Takasha and Rabbi Bar Avuna who says that since Rabbi Gamliel says that an esrog goes to a base you pick it, since an esrog goes based on when you pick it like a vegetable, says Rabbi Bar Avuna that therefore the Rosh Hashanah for it should be in Tishrei like vegetables. But we have this brisa that seems to be showing that Rabbi Gamliel's opinion is that even though an esrog for meiser goes based on when you pick it, nonetheless, its Rosh Hashanah is still Tu B'Shvat. What do you guys think? Eliyitmar Hachitmar. Rather, this is how you have to explain Rabbi Bar Avuna. Rabbi Bar Avuna says, the holy Rabbi Bar Avuna, Afalgav, the Rabbi Gamliel, there's Taka Gemara Ma'ikayin that we're going to learn in about 3 months or so, that maybe Taka 4 months, it's at the end of the Masechta, the Rabbi Bar Avuna was very, very humble, that Rava wanted to have an V'sanusa Rabbi Bar Avuna, the humility of Rabbi Bar Avuna, but he wasn't granted it. So now, Eliyitmar Achiyitmar, rather, we're going to say this, Rabbi Bar Avuna says, Rabbi Bar Avuna Afagav the Omer, Rabbi Gamliel, even though Rabbi Gamliel said, Esrog Lekita Kiyerek, even though Rabbi Gamliel says that the meiser of Esrogim is based on when you pick it like a vegetable, nonetheless, Rosh Hashanah Shelo Shvat, it's, Rosh Hashanah is nonetheless Shvat, it is not Tishrei, even though vegetables, their Rosh Hashanah for meiser is Tishrei, the esrog is still Shvat. Mashna also the katani meiser shnia nechneses l'shlishis, u'mashna hacha the katani meiser shlishis nechneses l'rvius. Now, friends, I'm sure most of you were wondering, the other day when we had a similar brisa with regard to vegetables, that if you pick the vegetables before the first of Tishrei, Kilu on Erev Rosh Hashanah, and you pick some vegetables before Shkia and then some more vegetables after Shkia, we say that they're considered 2 separate years. And we said if the second year was if the before Rosh Hashanah we're in the second year, and then after Rosh Hashanah we're in the third year. So the second year is going to be Meiser Sheni, third year is going to be Meiser Ani, and over here we're saying if the initial year was the third year and the year going into is the fourth year. So how come in the first brisa we say years 2 and 3, and in the second brisa we're saying years 3 and 4? That's what the Gemara wants to know. Ma'ishna Hasam, how come Takan Yud Beis and Beis the Katani Meiser Shnia Nechneses L'Shlishis? How come on Daf Yud Beis and Beis we're talking about the second year that goes into the third year? And how come over here we're talking about the third year going into the fourth year? So answer the Gemara, because here we're talking about Esrogim. And the Gemara wanted us to teach us some technical knowledge about Esrogim, which is the Esrog Kasha Lo Yoda, that an Esrog is very sensitive to human touch. And since on Shemitah, during Shemitah, when all the orchards are hefker, and everyone's going to the esrog orchards and Chapen Arayin, so the esrog trees are very delicate. Loton pri ad shnin, and it takes it 3 years to recuperate. And therefore, since all the people are going to the esrog orchards on Shemitah and Chapen Arayin from the esrog trees, so the esrog trees are very sensitive to human touch, and it kind of messes with them, and they're not going to produce fruit again for another 3 years. And therefore, memele, there isn't going to be fruit. You're not going to be picking an esrog on years 1, 2, and 3. You're only going to be picking an esrog kila after 3 years, and that's why we're saying if when you pick the esrog, it was right before the beginning of the fourth year. So you pick one right before Rosh Hashanah, right before Tu B'Shvat, one right after Tu B'Shvat. We're talking about the between years 3 and 4. But before then, there wouldn't be fruits because the esrog trees are still kind of recuperating after the traumatic Shemitah. Ba'amine Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Yanai. Now Rabbi Yochanan asked a kasha from Rabbi Yanai. Esrig Rosh Hashanah shelo emosai. So Rabbi Yochanan asks Rabbi Yanai, he says, when is the Rosh Hashanah for Esrogim? Amalei Shvat. So Rabbi Yanai says Shvat. Okay, fine. Shvat chodashim or Shvat tkufa? Oh. So now the Gemara wants to know, I guess Rabbi Yochanan wants to know, when we say Shvat, is it the month of Shvat or is it the tkufa of Shvat? What's the tkufa of Shvat? Well, basically, is it the lunar month, which is basically the month of Shvat, or is it the solar month of Shvat? And what that means is, of course, the solar year is 365 days, and you divide it up into 4 seasons, which is 91 and a quarter, I believe. 90 times 4 is 360, and then 1 times 4 is 4, so 364, and then 91. Each season is 91 and a quarter days. Okay, Givaldi. Now, so basically, it always, the Tkufa kind of basically always starts at the same time. So Tkufas Teves is always going to start, I don't know, what's it like, December 4th or something like that? That's like when they start saying V'sein Talmud Levracha in Chutz La'aretz. So like around like December 4th or something, right? So that is when Tkufas Teves begins. So are we saying that, so if it's the Teves, Shvat Tkufa, it basically means that you take a look at when Tkufas Teves begins, which is essentially like on or around December 4th, and then you count 30 days from them, and that is when, that would be the Shvat that we're talking about for the Rosh Chodesh, for the Rosh Hashanah for Esrogim. So Rabbi Yochanan wants to know, when we say that the Rosh Hashanah for Esrogim is in Shvat, is that the lunar month of Shvat, whenever that falls out, or is it the solar month of Shvat, which is 30 days after the Tkufas Teves begins? Okay? So Amid the Chodashim. So Rabbi Yanai says the lunar month of Shvat. So when it's the month of Shvat, that's when the Rosh Hashanah for Esrogim is. Mistam Tu b'Shvat. But Amine Rava Rav Nachman. Now Rava Taka asked Rav Nachman. V'amid Rabbi Yanai Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Yanai. Some Taka say Rabbi Yochanan asked Rabbi Yanai. Rosh Hashanah muberes mahu. And what if it is a leap year? So what's considered Shvat? Is Shvat considered the month after Teves? Or is Shvat considered the month before Adar, i.e. Adar Rishon? So Amalei Halechach Rav Hashanim, you go based on like most years. Meaning, the month that we call Shvat. Meaning when it's a leap year, Tu B'Shvat isn't in Adar Aleph. No, Tu B'Shvat is always going to be in Shvat. Leap year or not. Okay, now we get into Lemaisa, an interesting discussion regarding an Esrig between years 6 and 7, i.e. the year before Shemitah going into the year of Shemitah, and between years 7 and 8, i.e. Shemitah going into the year following Shemitah. So, Omer Rabba says, Rabba Esrig, Bashishis, that the Chanota, right, the fruit emerged, Bashish, right, Shishis, on the 6th year. Shenichnesa l'shvius, right? So remember, Chanota is when the fruit emerges. We're just going to refer to it as Chanota at this point, from this point on. It's like a legal document, right? What's it called? Like hereby referred to as Chanota. Something like that. Shenichnesa l'shvius, that goes into the Shemitah year. So basically, the Chanota was in the 6th year. The emergence of the fruit was in the 6th year. And now you pick it on the 7th year. So Ptura min ha-meiser, so it's potter from meiser. You don't have to separate meiser, which is interesting. But let's go weiter for a second. Uftura min ha-bir. We're going to have to explain why. But uftura min ha-bir, and you also don't need to make it hefker. Meaning, remember, fruits go based on chanota. They go based on when the fruits emerged. That's the year that we go based on, as we've learned. So now, you have this esrig. The chanote was in the 6th year of Shemitah cycle. Okay? Now, based on that, so it's considered that it's a 6th year fruit. So that being the case, it should be chayev in meiser, right? Although interestingly, Rabba is saying that it's potter from meiser. We're going to have to see why. And also, you do not need to make it hefker, right? The fruits of Shemitah, you have to make hefker. But this esrog, you would not need to make a hefker since the chanota was in the 6th year. So it's a 6th year fruit. You don't have to make 6th year fruits hefker. And an esrig from that the Chanata was in the 7th year during Shemitah, and now you pick it in the 8th year. So it's a Shemitah Esrig P'tur b'Maiser. It's potter from Maiser because all fruits of Shemitah are potter from Maiser. V'chayeves b'bir, but you have to make it hefker because it's a Shemitah Esrig. So if it's a Shemitah Esrig, you have to make it hefker. Okay. The only thing that doesn't make sense out of Rabba's statement is that he says that the Esrig from the 6th year that's picked on the 7th year is potter from Maiser, which is weird because if it's from the 6th year, it should be chayiv in Maiser. Now, Omerle Abaye. So now Abaye asks this question essentially. He says to his Rebbe Rabbah, Bishlom Seifa, L'chumra. I get it. I get the Seifa. We're being machmir. In the Seifa, in the second part of Rabbah's statement, he says that in Esrig, that the Chanata was in Shemitah, and now you pick it in the 8th year. So we're saying we treat it stringently. We treat it like a Shemitah Esrig, that it's potter from Maiser, and that you have to make it hefker because we treat it like a Shemitah Esrig. El Reisha P'tur min Abir, but if you look at the Reisha, the first part of the Brisa, it says that this Esrig from the 6th year, that the Chanata was in the 6th year and you pick it on the 7th year, you do not need to make it hefker. You do not need to make it hefker. Because after all, it's from the 6th year, not from Shemitah. Amai, how come? Because we say go based on when the Chanata was, and the Chanata was in the 6th year. So therefore you don't need to make it hefker. But if that's the case, the chayiv in Maiser. But then shouldn't it be chayiv in Maiser? If it's from the 6th year is chayiv in Maiser. Maiser Rishon, Maiser Ani. So that's Abaye's kasha. He says, I get 3 out of 4 of the statements. I get why in Esrig from the 6th year, you do not need to make hefker on Shemitah. I get why in Esrig from Shemitah, you would not need to separate Maiser from it, even though you picked it on the 8th year. I get why in Esrig from Shemitah that you picked on the 8th year, you would need to make hefker because it's a Shemitah Esrig. What I don't understand is why, Rabbi, you're saying that in Esrig, that the Chanata was in the 6th year, is going to be potter from Maiser when you pick it on the 7th year. Shouldn't it be chayiv, Maiser Rishon and Maiser Ani? Because after all, it's from the 6th year. Omar Le. Rabbi answers Abaye, Yarakol memashmashin ba. Well, here's the thing, says Rabbi. Look, Esrogim are chayiv and Maiser midrabon. Right? Midoraisa, as we've seen, Dagon, Tirosh, and Yitzhar, grain, grapes, and olives are chayiv in Maiser midoraisa. Esrogim are chayiv in Maiser midrabon. Now, the rabbi said, look, during Shemitah, all of the orchards are hefker. And everybody's coming into the orchards and chopping around from the orchards. They're not paying attention to if this particular esrig, the Chanata was in the 6th year or the 7th year. And therefore, Memele, this esrig, even though the Chanata was in the 6th year, everyone's chopping around from the tree on Shemitah anyways. And therefore, the rabbis weren't going to make you separate Maiser, and kind of like an additional tax, after everyone's already treating it like it's hefker. If everyone's treating it like hefker, well then we'll treat it like hefker also, right? Ownerless regarding Maiser, and say you don't have to separate Maiser either. So says Rabbah, even though technically speaking, yes, this Esrig, the Chanata was in the 6th year, but because practically speaking, on the 7th year, all of the orchards are hefker, are treated as ownerless, and everyone just kind of comes in and starts chopping around, we're not going to force the owner to now additionally separate Maiser. Right? So Amalei, so Rabbi responds, Yarakom mashmashin ba. Everyone's going into the orchard and chopping around from the Esrogim, regardless of if the Chanata was in the 6th year or the 7th year. Abaye, and you're going to say that additionally the owner of the field needs to separate Maiser as well. So therefore Rabbi says we kind of give him a break and says that this Esrog that the Chanata was in the 6th year is going to be potter from Maiser in the 7th year. Just because of, we're not going to make him separate Maiser if basically everyone's coming in and treating his orchard as hefker, as ownerless. Rav Amnuna Amar, whereas Rav Amnuna agrees with Rabbah on 3 out of 4 things, but he disagrees regarding the question that we had, regarding the Esrog from the 6th year that's picked on the 7th year. Amar bas shishis shenichneses l'shvius le'olam shishis. Says Rav Amnuna, look, it's a low plug. We don't make any distinctions. If the Chanota was in the 6th year, so we treat it as a 6th year Esrig, and what that means is that you have to separate Meiser, and you don't need to make it Hefker. Meaning, even though you don't need to make it Hefker, practically speaking, if it's in a field, people are going to chop around. But I don't know, if it's in your house, you're not going to have to take it out and make it Hefker. But also, it's going to be Chayav in Meiser, because it's from the 6th year. Uvashvias and Echneses Lishminis, and a Esrig from the 7th year, that the Chanota was in the 7th year, and it was picked on the 8th year, L'olam Shvias is always going to be treated as a 7th year Esrig, i.e., it's going to be Potter in Meiser, and Chayav it's going to be Potter in Meiser, and Chayav to make it Hefker. Meisvei. Now we have a kasha on both Rabbah and Rav Hamnuna. Reb Shimon ben Yehuda Omer, says Reb Shimon ben Yehuda, Mishum Reb Shimon, in the name of Reb Shimon, Esrig, Bas Shishis, so you have an Esrig that the Chanota was in the 6th year, Shenichneses L'Shvias, and now it's Shemitah. P'tura min ha-Meiser, so it's Potter from Meiser. It's Potter from Meiser. So of course that's going to be a kasha on Rav Hamnuna, who says that an Esrig from the 6th year is going to be Chayiv in Meiser. It's treated like the 6th year for all, like the 6th year for all things. So Rav Hamnuna says it's going to be Chayiv in Meiser, but this Bryce is saying Potter from Meiser. So this is a kasha of Rav Hamnuna. Uftura min abir. Okay, and you don't need to make the Esrig Hefker since it's from the 6th year. Because when it comes to Meiser, it's only going to be Chayiv in Meiser. Elimkin Gadol b'chiyuv v'nilkot b'chiyuv. It has to grow with the chiyuv of Meiser and be picked with the chiyuv of Meiser, and therefore this Esrig, while it grew in the 6th year, the Chanota was in the 6th year, but it got picked in the 7th year, and in the 7th year there's no Meiser, so therefore this Brisa is saying that there's no Meiser when in Esrig the Chanota was in the 6th year. That's like Rabbah, but not like Rav Hamnuna. Now, uvas shvias shenichneses l'shminis, an Esrig that the Chanota was in the 7th year and was picked in the 8th year, p'tura min ha-Meiser, so it's Potter from Meiser. Okay, fine. So everyone that's in accordance with Rabbah and Rav Hamnuna, they agree with that because it's from the 7th year. But uftur min abir, but you also do not need to make it hefker, because she'ein l'chadav sh'chayv bebir, because something is only going to be chayiv to become hefker. Adam ken gadol b'shvias v'nilka b'shvias. It has to grow during Shemitah and also be picked during Shemitah. So whereas this Esrog, while it was grown during Shemitah, while the Chanota was during Shemitah, it was picked after Shemitah, therefore you do not need to make it Hefker. This is a question on both Rabbah and Rav Hamnuna, because they both agree that if the Esrog, the Chanota, was in the 7th year, well then you're going to have to make it Hefker even if you pick it in the 8th year, whereas this Brisa is saying that no, you don't need to make it Hefker in the 8th year, since when you picked it, it wasn't Shemitah, so therefore you don't have to make it Hefker. That's a kasha on both Rabbah and Rav Hamnuna. Now, Reisha kasha Rav Hamnuna, the Gemara clarifies for us that the first part of the Brisa, which says that a Esrig, that the Chanota was in the 6th year and was picked in the 7th year, is Potter from Meiser, that's a kasha on Rav Hamnuna, who says that it will be Chayiv in Meiser. Seifa kasha bein the Rabbah bein the Rav Hamnuna, and the Seifa, the second part of the Brisa, which says that when the Chanota was in the 7th year and was picked in the 8th year, it is going to be Potter from being made, you don't have to make it Hefker. That's a kasha on both Rabbah and Rav Hamnuna. Tanoihi, to which the Gemara says, no sweat, no big deal. It's a machlokas Tanoim. Yes, it's true. This Brisa is going to be problems for Rabbah and Rav Hamnuna. However, Limaisa, there's another Tana that Rav and Rav Hamnuna are assuming like a different Tana. The Tanya, as we learn in the Brisa, Amr Reb Yossi, says Reb Yossi, Av Tulmus said mishum chamisha zekenim, that Av Tulmus testified, quoting, representing 5 elders. What did he say in the name of these 5 elders? Esrig achal kitasu lemeiser. That in Esrig, when it comes to Meiser, it's based on when it is picked. All right. Rabbeinu nimnu b'usha v'amru. And the rabbis got together in a place called Usha. The Maaseh Nachlot, there's a street called Usha. I know somebody who lives on that street, but Usha is also a place, I think, in northern Israel, like by Tzipori and those places. Tveria, over in that place in Nachlot, there's like all those streets. Tveria, Tzipori, there's the Nachlot Shul, that I know Jordan likes to daven at the Mayanot synagogue. I think that's like on like Tzipori Street or something like that. And then comes Narkis. What's Narkis? Anyways, where are we again? So how did we get here? Right. So this rabbi said in Usha, Achar l'kitaso bein l'maiser bein l'shvius, that no, we go based on when it's picked, not just for maiser, but also for shmita. Shvius mandachar shmei. Wait a second. Who said anything about shmita? Right. Meaning Avtumos said the name of these rabbis that we go by maiser based on when you pick it. The rabbis in Usha that said that we go based on when you pick it for Meiser, but also by Shemitah. Who said anything about Shemitah? So it's missing a few words, and this is what you have to say. Esrog achar l'kitaso l'Meiser v'achar chanota l'shvius. That Avtumos said the name of these rabbis, of these elders, that when it comes to Esrogim, so they go based on when you pick it for Meiser, but when it comes to Shemitah, it's based on the chanota. It's going to be based on the chanota when it comes to Shemitah. Rabbeinu nimnu b'usha v'gamru, and the rabbis in Usha said, achar l'kitaso, no, it always goes based on its picking, bein the meiser, bein the shvius, whether for meiser or whether for Shemitah. So therefore, these rabbis, Rabbah and Rav Amnuna, were assuming like Avtumus, who said the name of these elders, that when it comes to Shemitah, the esrog is going to be based, the halachas are going to be based on when the chanota was. And therefore, when the chanota was in the 6th year, we treat it like a 6th year esrog. And when the chanota is in the 7th year, we treat it like a 7th year esrog. And therefore, if you have an esrog that the chanota was in the 7th year, so therefore, it's going to be chayav to make it hefker, even if you pick it in the 8th year. And it's going to be potter from meiser. When it comes to a esrog from the 6th year, so it's going to be potter from making, you don't have to make it hefker because it's from the 6th year. Now when it comes to separating meiser, Rav Amnuna says, since it's from the 6th year, memele, if it goes based on the chanota, so you have to separate meiser, even if you pick it in the 7th year. Rabbah says, while I agree with you with that in principle, because since on the 7th year it's treated as hefker, all the orchards are open, says Rabbah, the Chachamim said, even though we go based on when the chanota is, they said we're not going to make you separate meiser since everyone's basically treating it as hefker anyways. But in principle, both Rabbah and Rav Amnuna agree with the opinion of Tulmus, which is that when it comes to Shemitah, by Esrogim, we go based on the chanota, the year in which the chanota was, the year in which the fruit emerged. Itmar was stated, Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish Amar Tarvayu, say both Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, esrog, that when it comes l'maisa to an esrog, bas shishish nechneses l'shvius, an esrog of the 6th year, that goes into the, right, so the chanota was in the 6th year, and now you pick it in the 7th year, the olam shishis, you're always going to treat it like the 6th year. It's going to be chayiv and meiser and potter from beer, just like Rav Hamnuna. Omer Rabbi Yochanan, no, ki also Ravin said, when Ravin came, Rabbi Yochanan said the name of Rabbi Yochanan, esrog, when you have an esrog, bas shishish nechneses l'shvius, an esrog that the chanota was in the 6th year, and you pick it on the 7th year, afilu kazayis, even if it grew only 1 olive's worth in the 6th year, v'naisis kikar, and in the 7th year during Shemitah, a mamish became the size of a loaf of bread, chayav anuleh mishum tevel, if you eat it, you're going to be chayav for eating tevel, because even though the most of its growth happened during Shemitah, it is not potter from Trumas and Maisus. You have to separate Trumas and Maisus, and if you don't, you're going to be eating tevel, which is I think misa b'dei shamayim, and because the chanota was in the, even if it was only kazayis, that's enough. The chanota was in the 6th year. It's chayiv in Trumas and Maisus. Taner Rabbanan, the rabbis taught Elon. If you have a piece of tree, shechantu peirosov kodem tu b'shvat, that the fruits emerged before Tu B'Shvat, Misasur l'shana she'avra, so then they're counted as the year prior to Tu B'Shvat. Acher Tu B'Shvat, if the chanota was after Tu B'Shvat, Misasur l'shana haba, so then the meiser is based on the upcoming year. Fine. Now, Amar Ibn Nechemi disagrees and he says, when do we say that Tu B'Shvat is the cutoff? Be'ilan she'osa shtei brechos b'shana, with a tree that has 2, like, I think, what it's called by birds, broods or something in a year. To which the Gemara says, why are we talking about brechas over here? Brechas are by birds. It's like 2 broods, meaning it has 2 like growth spurts. And if that, it provides fruits twice in the year. And these trees that provide fruits twice in the year, so then their cutoff is going to, so the cutoff for Meiser is going to be based on Tu B'Shvat. Aval, but Ilana Osa Brecha Achas, but a tree that only produces fruits once a year, could go into column, like dates, vizeisim, and olives, vachruvin, and carobs, even if the chanata was before Tu B'Shvat, misasun l'shana haba, the meiser is based on when you pick them, and if you pick them in the year following Tu B'Shvat, it's going to be based on that year. Okay, fine. Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan bachruvin kreb Nechemia. Okay, says Rabbi Yochanan that when it comes to carobs, the minig is like Rabbi Nechemia, that people base the carob meiser based on when it is picked. Now, Esvei Rish Lakish to Rabbi Yochanan. Rish Lakish asks a kasha on Rabbi Yochanan. He says, I don't understand. But no shuach, when it comes to white figs, Shvi'ez Shala and Shniya, their Shemitah is the second year of the Shemitah cycle. It's not the year of Shemitah. Right now in Eretz Yisrael, it's Shemitah. But when it comes to these white figs, the Shemitah for these white figs is going to be in 2 years from now. Because they make fruit for 3 years. So what do we see? So we see that 2 years into the Shemitah cycle, these white figs still have the halacha of Shemitah because the Chanata was in 2 years earlier, was in Shemitah. And therefore, what do we see? We see that it's based on the Chanata. It's not based on when you pick it. You're picking it in the second year of the Shemitah cycle. It's not Shemitah. But the Chanata was 2 years prior, during Shemitah. And therefore, this Brisa is saying that these white figs, 2 years into the Shemitah cycle, they still have the din of Shemitah since that's when the Chanata was. So how could Rabbi Yochanan say that when it comes to these carobs, the minig is that we treat the carobs based on when you pick it? What do you mean the minig is that you treat the carobs based on when you pick it for Meiser? It's based on the Chanata. As we see that by these white figs, even 2 years into Shemitah cycle, they still have the halachas of Shemitah since the Chanata was during Shemitah. Ishtik. Rabbi Yochanan was quiet. Omli Rabbi Abba, HaKohen, Rabbi Yossi HaKohen. Says Rabbi Abba HaKohen to Rabbi Yossi HaKohen. Amai Ishtik. Why was Rabbi Yochanan quiet? Lema lei. Let Rabbi Yochanan respond to Rish Lakish. Amina lach honor Rabbi Nechemia. I'm saying that people are doing like Rabbi Nechemia. V'atomotli Rabban, you're asking me kashas from the fact that the Rabbanan disagree with Rabbi Nechemia and say it's based on the Chanata. Mishum da'amal shavak the Rabbanan v'avad the Rabbi Nechemia. To which the Gemara says, well, that wouldn't be a good response because there's an obvious answer. Well, Rabbi Yochanan, why are you passing like Rabbi Nechemia when the Rabbanan disagree? Shouldn't you hold like the Rabbanan and say it's based on Chanata? V'lei malei. The Gemara gives another strange answer that will let Rabbi Yochanan say to Rish Lakish, well, I'm just saying that the people have the minig to go like Rabbi Yochanan and you're like Rabbi Nechemia, and you're asking me a kasha from the fact that the halacha is like the rabbis. To which the Gemara says, what? To which Rish Lakish could easily respond to that. That's a silly answer. Yes, I'm telling you that the halacha is that it's based on Chanata. How could they just ignore the halacha and apply their own minig to go based on likita? You can't just do that. So okay, but let Rabbi Yochanan respond to Rish Lakish and say, yeah, I'm saying that the minig is that by carobs, which are only chayv and meiser midir abonon, the minig is that the people do like Rabbi Nechemia, that they go based on when they pick it. And you're asking me a kasha from the fact that when it comes to Shemitah by these white figs, they're chayv and Shemitah on the second year because of the second year of the Shemitah cycle because the Chanata was during Shemitah. Shemitah is the Oraisa. Meiser of carobs is the Rabbanan. Why are you asking me a kasha from a de Oraisa based on what I said regarding a de Rabbanan? So that's taka. Rabbi Yochanan could have responded that way. So why didn't Rabbi Yochanan respond that way? Elo Omer Rabbi Abba HaKohen, rather says Rabbi Abba HaKohen, Tamehani Yemeshiva Rish Lakish L'tshuvazo. To which Rabbi Abba HaKohen says, I wonder if Rish Lakish actually did in fact respond to Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan could have then replied back to him, like we said, that, I'm talking about Derabban, you're talking about Deraisa. Yemeshiva Ha'osva. What do you mean we're not sure if Rish Lakish replied? He did reply. We just said that Rish Lakish asked Rabbi Yochanan, what about these white figs? So Ela Ema in Kibla Rabbi Yochanan lo Kibla. No, rather say that, it says Abba HaKohen, that I'm not sure if Rabbi Yochanan actually paid any attention to Rish Lakish's question. Yes, Rish Lakish asked Rabbi Yochanan, what about these white figs in Shemitah? Now, it says Rabbi Abba HaKohen, I'm not sure if Rabbi Yochanan really took that question seriously or not, because after all, he could have just responded that, look, I'm talking about, yes, they have a minig like Nechemia regarding caribs, which are derabanan, chayiv ma'aser derabanan, and you're asking me kasha from shmita, which is deraisa. It doesn't. It's apples and oranges. So says Rabbi Abba Cohen. I'm not sure if Rabbi Yochanan really paid much attention to Rish Lakish's question because it wasn't a super strong question. Friends, that was daf Tesvav, daf 15 of Masechta Rosh Hashanah. So the first part of the daf began with a statement of Rabbi Bar Huna regarding the Rosh Hashanah for Meiser of Esrogim. First, we had a thought to say that, well, since Rabbi Gamliel says that the Esrogim, their Meiser is based on when you pick them like vegetables, so maybe the Rosh Hashanah should be in Tishrei like vegetables, to which we ultimately proved that wrong, and therefore we had to explain Rabbi Bar Huna as saying that no, even though Meiser of Esrogim is based on when you pick them, nonetheless, their Rosh Hashanah is in Shvat like all other fruits. Then we got into an interesting machlokas between Rabbah and Rav Amnuna regarding Esrogim on Shvius. So therefore, regarding Esrogim on Shvius, so Rabbah had said that when it comes to so essentially both Rabbah and Rav Amnuna agree that the Esrogim go based on the Chanoto, when the fruits emerged, and therefore if the fruits emerged on the 6th year, so then it won't be Shemitah, and therefore you won't have to make it Hefker on Shemitah. And if the Esrig emerged on the 7th year, so it will be Shemitah, and therefore you have to make it Hefker, but you don't have to separate Maisvus from it. Now, where they disagree is an Esrig from the 6th year, that the Chanata was in the 6th year, do you have to separate Maisvus from it on the 7th year? Rabbah says no, because since all the orchards are Hefker and everyone's going and hopping around, we're not going to make the owner separate Maiser from it. Whereas Rav Amnuna says no, it emerged in the 6th year. The 6th year is not Shemitah, it's going to be Chayiv in Maiser. We then had a Brisa, which seemed to be understanding things differently, which is that in order to be Chayiv in Maiser, the Chanota and the Lakita both have to be in a year where it's Chayiv in Maiser, and therefore an Esrog from the 6th year that you pick on the 7th year is going to be Potter from Maiser, since you picked it during Shemitah. And also when it comes to Bi'ur, to making it Hefker, also it would have to have the Chanota and Lakita in a year in which, basically during Shemitah, where you have to make it Hefker. And if it is picked in the 8th year, you would not have to make it Hefker. So it's a kasha on both Rabbah and Rav Amnuna, to which we said that it's actually machlokas Tanoim, that there's the opinion of Avtulmus, who says that basically when it comes to Esrogim and Shemitah, it's always going to be based on the Chanota, the year in which the fruit emerged, and therefore, so we're going to treat it based on the year in which it emerged, regardless of when it was picked. The only difference is that Rabbah says that an Esrog from the 6th year is going to be Potter from Meiser in the 7th year, since it's, everyone's treating it as Hefker, so we're not going to make you separate Meiser. We then saw a Brisa which says that when it comes to fruits, so then the year of Meiser is based on the Chanota. If the Chanota was before Tu B'Shvat, so then it goes based on the previous year. If it's after Tu B'Shvat, then it goes on based on the upcoming year. Reb Nechemia wants to make a distinction and say that, well, that's only for trees that produce fruit twice a year, but trees that produce fruit once a year, it's based on when you pick it. Okay, that's the opinion of Reb Nechemia. Rabbi Yochanan says that the minig is that when it comes to caribs, it's going to be based on the year in which you pick it. Rish Lakish wanted to ask a question based on the fact that white figs, when it comes to Shemitah, their Shemitah is actually 2 years into the Shemitah cycle, since the Chanota was based on it was 2 years prior during Shemitah. So then how could Rabbi Yochanan say that by caribs we go based on when you pick it, if we see that by Shemitah it's based on the Chanota, to which essentially we say, look, it's Arabs and apples and oranges, right? Rabbi Yochanan's talking about caribs, taking Meiser from caribs, which is derabanan, whereas Shemitah is deraisa. So how can you ask from that? So, okay. Friends, that was Daf Tesvav, Masechta Rosh Hashanah. Of course, I hope you enjoyed it. And of course, I hope you enjoyed the day. Peace out.